Welcome to the very first episode of Michelle's Podcast News. I am your host, Michelle Tandler, and I am thrilled to bring you the latest updates from the podcasting community. In each episode, we will dive into the most exciting news, trends, and developments in the world of podcasting, covering companies, technologies, and partnerships that are shaping the industry. Today, we have some groundbreaking news from Spotify. The streaming giant is debuting a major change for podcasts on its platform: comments. Yes, you heard that right. Now listeners can comment on any episode inside the Spotify app, and creators can respond to their audience with ease. This new feature is rolling out now and promises to enhance the interactive experience for both listeners and podcasters. According to Spotify's announcement post, the new comments feature builds upon the Q&A and polls functionality that was introduced back in 2021. This was the first time interactivity was brought into the podcasting industry, and it has been a tremendous success. In fact, more than 9 million unique Spotify listeners have interacted with a Q&A or poll just this year, and there has been an 80% year-over-year growth in the number of total Q&A responses and votes from listeners. So, how will comments work on Spotify? Just like you would expect, and just like they do on other web platforms such as YouTube. Replies and likes will be enabled for comments, and podcasters will have the option to hold comments for review before they are published. This ensures that the comments section remains a positive and constructive space. To make things even more convenient for creators, a newly updated Spotify for Podcasters app is also debuting today. This will be the place where creators can manage and interact with comments on their shows. Now, the big question on everyone's mind: will Apple Podcasts be next? As podcasting has grown on YouTube, comments have been one of the main ways that podcasts on the platform have been differentiated from services like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. With another major platform now adopting comments, the pressure is on for Apple to follow suit. As of now, there are no major changes coming to Apple Podcasts in iOS 18, just some minor tweaks. However, perhaps in a future point release update, Apple will enable podcast comments, following the example of their competitors. That wraps up our first segment for today. Stay tuned as we dive into more exciting developments in the podcasting world right here on Michelle's Podcast News. In another exciting development, Spotify has announced the rollout of a highly anticipated feature for podcast creators: public comments. This new feature is set to replace the existing Q&A and polls that allowed podcast creators to ask questions to their listeners and share their replies in episodes. According to Spotify, podcasts have traditionally been a one-sided format. While the platform has offered other interactivity features like polls and Q&A for some time, users have expressed a desire for more direct forms of engagement. Now, for the first time, listeners can have a two-way conversation with their favorite podcast hosts on Spotify. This means podcasters can get near immediate feedback from their audiences, fostering real communities around shows. With the existing Q&A feature, listeners' responses were private by default, and podcast creators could choose to make their favorite ones public. These public answers will still appear on episode pages, but podcast creators will no longer be able to create new Q&As. However, comments on Spotify podcasts will also be private by default, with creators having the option to pick the ones they want to make public. To support this new feature, Spotify is launching a new Spotify for Creators app available on both mobile and web. This app includes a comments tab where creators can review comments and respond to specific ones. When a creator responds to a comment, the listener will automatically receive a notification. This makes it easier for podcasters to manage their interactions and engage with their audience more effectively. Additionally, the new Spotify for Podcasters portal will automatically notify podcast creators when their shows hit new milestones or make it to a Spotify chart. Spotify is also working on an automated moderation tool that will automatically publish podcast comments that meet the company's content guidelines. This ensures that the comments section remains a positive and constructive space for everyone. This feature marks a significant shift in how podcasts can engage with their audience on Spotify. By enabling comments, Spotify is not only enhancing the interactive experience, but also paving the way for stronger community building around podcasts. It will be interesting to see how this feature evolves and whether it will inspire other platforms to adopt similar functionalities. In another exciting development, Spotify is giving its podcast listeners a new way to interact with their favorite shows, posting comments. These comments will be shown on each episode's page in Spotify's app. This builds on the existing Q&A and poll functionality introduced in 2021, with Spotify claiming that more than 9 million listeners have interacted with those features in 2024 so far. Comments have been a long-requested feature from both podcasters and Spotify listeners, said Spotify's Vice President of Podcast Product, Maya Prahovnik. Podcasts have historically been a one-sided format, and while we have offered other interactivity features like polls and Q&A for some time, people have told us they want more ways to connect directly. So, Spotify now has a comment section, but only for podcasts so far. Music Ally is very interested in whether this feature could roll out for music too in the future. For many years now, Chinese streaming service NetEase Cloud Music has talked about its thriving comments section, where fans gather to discuss albums and artists. We have always wondered whether Western digital service providers would try something similar. Spotify now has that functionality, so the question is whether it will extend it from podcasts to music, and what challenges that might bring in terms of moderation. The comments rollout for podcasts was accompanied by a revamp of the Spotify for Podcasters mobile app, with features to manage comments on episodes and more notifications about their show's performance. The ability to post comments on podcasts represents a significant shift in how audiences can engage with their favorite shows on Spotify. By enabling this feature, Spotify is not only enhancing the interactive experience, but also paving the way for stronger community building around podcasts. It will be interesting to see how this feature evolves and whether it will inspire other platforms to adopt similar functionalities. In another exciting development, Apple Podcasts has introduced a new feature that allows users to share time-stamped links. This means that when you share a podcast link with friends, they can start listening from a specific moment rather than having to wade through an entire episode. This feature is part of the iOS 18 update and is designed to make podcast sharing more convenient and user-friendly. This feature is not entirely new to the digital world. Video streaming platforms such as YouTube and third-party podcast apps like Overcast have offered time-stamped links for some time. However, it is a welcome addition to Apple's stock podcast app, which remains one of the most popular ways for people to listen to podcasts on their iPhones. So, how can you share time-stamped podcast links in iOS 18? First, you will need to install the iOS 18 beta. If you have a backup device, it is best to install the beta there to avoid introducing any instability to your main phone. Once iOS 18 is installed, open the Podcasts app and play the episode you want to share. The episode will appear in the mini player at the bottom of the screen. Tap the mini player to expand it, then hit the three dots icon to the right of the episode's name. Tap Share Episode to see the share sheet. At the top of the share sheet, you will see the option From Start. Select this to see another option to share time-stamped podcast links. You will see two options, From Start and From Wherever you are in the podcast. The second option automatically picks up the timestamp where you hit the share button. Select it to get a shareable time-stamped link. The good news is that time-stamped links work with older versions of iOS and macOS. You can share these links with people on devices that have not been updated, and they will still be able to play the episode from the timestamp you have set. There are a few quirks to be aware of when using this feature. For instance, Apple Podcasts does not allow you to manually choose a timestamp by typing it in. Instead, you will have to seek to the time you want to share, pause the podcast, and then hit the share button to choose a timestamp. This can be slightly inconvenient, and hopefully, Apple will allow users to manually type in the timestamp in future updates for greater flexibility. Another quirk is that timestamps will update while you are in the share screen. If you hit the share button while playing an episode and wait a few minutes on the screen while the podcast plays, the app will automatically share a link with the current timestamp. For example, if you hit the share button while at 2:20 in the podcast and wait until 7:30 before tapping the From 2:20 button, Apple Podcasts will share a link timestamped for 7:30. Our final story for today takes us to New Zealand, where a new one-off fund has been announced to support arts and culture podcasts. Creative New Zealand, NZ On Air, and Radio New Zealand are collaborating to address a deficit in media coverage about arts and culture in Aotearoa, as highlighted by the New Mirrors research conducted by Rosabelle Tan and James Wenley. The New Mirrors research has shown a lack of arts and culture media across New Zealand, and it outlines several ways to address this problem. In response, the three agencies have created a one-off fund aimed at generating new arts media opportunities. Tracy Monastra, Creative New Zealand's manager of advocacy, stated that the research demonstrates a need for new ways to develop coverage of the arts. She emphasized the importance of having a stronger and more visible arts sector with artists' voices reflected across the media landscape. The fund, which opens on July 22nd, will support the development of up to 4 podcasts. These podcasts will explore New Zealand's arts and culture from new and inventive perspectives, catering to audiences and art forms that are currently underserved by the existing arts media. Kelly Davis, NZ On Air's acting co-head of funding, expressed the agency's commitment to high-quality, diverse content for Aotearoa audiences. She highlighted the importance of partnerships with other agencies to stimulate more coverage of arts and culture stories. Strong media coverage of arts and culture is essential for the creative sector to thrive. The media serves as a crucial bridge between artists and the public, offering artists a platform to amplify their stories. Jana Te Nahu Owen, RNZ's Maori Commissioner and Strategic Advisor for the fund, hopes to see a wide range of applications from artists and content creators that reflect the diverse arts and culture sector in Aotearoa. She added that this fund allows producers and artists to come up with fresh and innovative approaches to the podcast medium. Te Nahu Owen also mentioned that RNZ's award-winning podcast and audio teams are available to support the projects and produce high-quality audio programs that address the key points of the New Mirrors report. Applications for the fund will be assessed by representatives from Creative New Zealand, NZ On Air, and Radio New Zealand. For more information about the Arts and Culture Podcast Co-Fund, visit creativenz.gov.nz. And that wraps up our first episode of Michelle's Podcast News. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found today's updates as exciting as I did. Join us again tomorrow for more news and insights from the podcasting world. Until then, happy listening.